First off, I think I've probably been guilty of saying this myself, and I don't want to convey the wrong information. I've probably said recovery equals adaptation, adaptation equals recovery. It's not necessarily true, because you can get recovered. I mean, you can do a 7-day stage race, and you can recover for the second stage in time for, or from the second stage in time for the third, from the third in time for the fourth, et cetera. So you're recovered, you're ready to do it again, but there's no real adaptation taking place over the course of that. I mean, you finish one ride wrecked, you get your glycogen restored and rest a bit, and you're ready to go again. You're recovered, but adaptation is maybe just in the process of kicking off, and then you're going to go throw another dose of training stress at it. So the two aren't synonymous. However, adaptation does take place during recovery. So that much is true. So don't equate the two as the same thing, but do recognize that you need to be in a state of recovery for adaptation to take place.
So it just takes more time of consistent recovery to get that adaptation.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can do, I think
that makes sense. So I may not be making the adaptations that I'm going for every single day, but my recovery every day contributes to that longer ball game.
Exactly. The adaptation is going to come at some point, but if you're stacking workouts, or if you have a heavy loading week or a series of loading weeks, the adaptive effect is going to come more at the end of it when you give yourself effective recovery that allows the adaptation.
So hence the existence of recovery weeks.
You got it. And recovery anything. Recovery days, recovery transition seasons, et cetera.
Cool.
And then recovery is subjective. So it can depend on so many things: your stress level, your age, your training history, your chronological, I said age, but your training age, your chronological age. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can affect the rate at which you recover. And I'll get to this too, but the composition of the training load. If you're doing a whole bunch of base work, it's a lot easier to recover from that than a whole bunch of VO2 max work.
Yeah.
And then it's volume dependent too. So if you're a low volume trainer and you're only on the bike 3 days a week, you may not need an entire recovery week. You may just need an extended weekend. In fact, you may not need a recovery week, period. You could probably do 3 days of loading forever, and well, not forever, but for a very long time, and still continue to see upticks in performance, improvements in FTP, improvements in whatever, 1 minute power, 10-minute power, whatever. So, but if you're a high volume trainer, that recovery becomes much more important, especially if you're at the high end of things and you're an athlete who has ascended to a level where your gains are super marginal. It's at that point where recovery is becoming increasingly important. So you have to get it just right. So for instance, and this is just one of the ways in which recovery is subjective. If you look at masters athletes, a lot of the time it works really well to load for 2 weeks and then recover for a week. Rather than postpone it till the 4th week, they do it on the 3rd week. And that can work out really well, but again, composition dependent. Some athletes, and even in the sweet spot base blocks, because of their composition, I load for 5 weeks before I recover. And I found that to work really well over the 5 years that I use these in indoor classes. So there's a certain amount of flexibility that's already built into that. You don't have to take it as gospel just because says you need to recover for a week. Maybe you don't, because by the end of that week, maybe you're actually starting to backslide a little bit and you've recognized, I've felt fresh for 3 days now. Why am I still resting? You probably don't need to be.
Yeah, and along those lines, and we'll get into some more science on this, but Nate, you and I have mentioned this many times, but life forces me to take recovery weeks, right?
That's what's happening to John.
Yeah.
So Chad, if I'm not consistent during my 3 weeks, do I need to take a recovery week? I mean, it's pretty, you just answered the question. But.
Yeah, very probably not. So what I don't want is people to see this as checking boxes. I don't want them to do, they miss a week, so they jump to next week's workouts when there was a progression that they're going to skip effectively, and then they go back and tack that progression on later when it doesn't even make sense. They've escalated their VO2 max workouts from 5 to 6 to 7, then they miss the one that has 8 and jump straight to 9, and then during a recovery week, go back and pick up that 8 interval workout.
Right.
That's not how it makes sense. So you have to do a little bit of rearranging. And you also have to consider that over the course of that recovery week, you do still need some recovery, very probably. So don't go into it and take, ideally, I want the recovery done early in the week. Give yourself some recovery and then tack on those workouts and go into your next loading block. I mean, you could do it the other way around. Actually, you could do it the other way around. I guess that is a bit flexible.
The
do
big
whatever
thing,
you want.
But just
be
paying attention to when you need the recovery and taking the recovery at the right time.
I can't remember the last time I took a recovery week because life makes me inconsistent. I try as best as I can to be consistent, but I think everybody listening to this knows, and for that from experience, like, the plan's laid out and you try as hard as you can to do it, but then you miss 1 or 2 workouts that week. And then as a result, with that weekend, when you have an off day, something like that, you're like, man, I really don't feel that tired, because you're used to sustaining more and just life doesn't allow you to sustain it.
I can remember my recovery weeks and I always get a big pump in fitness because the previous weeks, I did the actual volume
Yeah.
that I needed. So I did the 3 or 4 weeks of volume or 5 in sweet spot base, and then I took a recovery week, and I was like,
But
wow, I'm a new athlete.
Most of your recovery weeks, though, are like a work trip, something like that. A lot of the times,
Going on
because
this next month, I have 2.5 weeks of, like 3 weeks of travel over 4 weeks, and I'm not going to be able to train during any of those,
Yeah.
or do very little. And so there you go. Like I'm trying to load into it, because why would I take a recovery week right before that?
Sure.
Yep.
Life happens.
Yeah, and I found that, so in my case with like right now, I've been following general build, and when I go through general build and I have that recovery week that comes up, I've been going through and basically, and this is optional. We get to see if Chad thinks I'm doing something wrong on live on air here, but basically, so let's say I have weeks 1, 2, and 3, and I'm building up, and then the 4th week is that recovery week. Yeah. I've been repeating week 3's workouts, but then I've been tacking on, whether it's an extra interval, I've been tacking on perhaps shrinking rest, adding tempo onto the end, something like that.
Yeah, so you're recognizing I'm still fresh enough to be able to do harder workouts, and you're progressing those workouts, making them harder workouts. So that's exactly the way I'd recommend doing it, and that's the way I'd recommend people do it. I mean, just because you arrive at a recovery week, if you know I don't need recovery right now, I'm still going strong, and you're being sensible about it. You're not just riding a wave and pushing yourself because you can, but you feel that you should.
Yeah, and an easy way to do this with the app is you can extend the cooldown now. So you basically just extend the cooldown, and then if you're on a smart trainer, just put that smart trainer in resistance mode. So then you can ride it, whatever you want, and then you can dictate what you want to do for your interval. Yeah. It's an easy way to do it.
Sure. So I've done that same thing where if I have, let's say I have a 4-week block, but I'm traveling on the 5th week. So that travel, I know that should be my recovery week.
Sure.
On the 4th week, I'll repeat the 3rd week like you do, Jonathan, but I'll just repeat it because usually the 3rd week, like they were so hard, and I'm going to have a little bit extra. Like I don't need to progress anymore. I just want to maintain that,
right?
Because
it's giving you enough as is. Right?
Exactly. It's giving me plenty.
Yeah.
And then too, mentally, because I normally that 4th week, it's recovery, get to rest. I'm like, at least I'm doing the same workouts I've done before, so it's a little bit easier mentally, and then I go into the last week.
You have to be adaptive and you have to be responsive. You can't just take a training plan at its for what's presented. You can't just look at it and say, this is what I'm going to do regardless. I mean, there's always other factors entering into it.
Totally.
So it's just one of those instances where you get a sense of what you can and cannot handle.
I think it's like the no offense to some people, but it's like The Office where the GPS tells him to turn, and he's like listening and turns into the river. Like, this is the way it's supposed to go.
We have
just
to follow the machine.
following.
We have to follow it. It's okay.
That's a great episode. That was funny.